welcome. I hope everyone has had a good time and learned a lot from the posters. It's now time to hear the keynote speech, which is by Kyaien Connor. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and coming for this talk. I think we're just finishing up the voting on the posters, so if you can go add your selections. You have till 11:10 to add your selections. Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you everyone again for coming today. I saw almost all a lot of the posters, and they're awesome, and I've really fantastic. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Connor. I am really thrilled that we have Kyaien Connor presenting here today. I'm lucky. I got to know Kyaien when she was here in Pittsburgh during her fellowship, and that was wonderful. I mean, she did her geriatric mental health T32 training in a program that over time things change. I now am partly leading, and so I get to brag about her every time we write our progress report, and so I know how amazing she is. And then I got to meet her again when I was working with the Advanced Research Institute in Geriatric Mental Health. We were looking to try and find somebody who can help us move forward in thinking about the challenges of the future. And lo and behold, we found out Kyaien Connor was coming back to Pittsburgh. So I was really thrilled. And I hear from people also how much they appreciate her way of expressing these challenging and new ideas. She's taught me new ways to think about things, and I'm sure she will you as well. I'm going to stop there and let her do the speaking. Thank you so much, Kyaien, for agreeing to do this today.
Thank you all so much. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here, albeit apologetically that it has to be virtual. I was really excited to come and be there in person, but I'm actually receiving an award today for my work in health equity at Dartmouth University. So I'm in someone else's office on another campus a few states away, but really honored to be able to have this time to chat with you all this morning at this really amazing program and talk a little bit about sort of my path to leadership, my path to scholarship, and how I've strived to create a culture of excellence within myself, my teams, and the work that I've done that has sort of led me to come back to the University of Pittsburgh, which I'm really excited and honored to be back. So I'm going to share a little bit about my past, my experiences. I'm going to talk about some nuggets of wisdom that I've learned along the way that have really shaped the direction of my research, my scholarship, but also how I see myself as a researcher and as a member of the academy, and talk about how those sort of nuggets informed some new research developments in the path of research that I've taken that have led me to my current position, where I've come back to Pitt as a full professor and endowed chair, as the director of the Center on Race and Social Problems, and as the associate dean for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the School of Social Work. So I want to tell you a little bit more about who I am, because I think that that's important to know the lens that I take to these issues, and also sort of, you know, the inspiration for the kind of work that I do. Howard is right. I've been at Pitt for a very long time. I actually got all of my degrees at the University of Pittsburgh, a bachelor's in psychology in 2002. Then I got my master's in social work, got licensed, was working in the field as a clinician, and came back to do a dual MPH PhD, PhD in social work with my master's in public health, specializing in minority health and health disparities, and then my postdoctoral fellowship in the Late Life Depression Center, which was really exciting. And during my time as a postdoc is when I received my first sort of grant from the National Institutes of Mental Health, which was a K award, a K23, which is a patient-oriented career development award, which was sort of my first big entree into the development of interventions and clinical interventions research, moving myself into sort of an independent scientist role, which I then took with me to the University of South Florida for 10 years, where I got tenured, did a lot of really cool things, really sort of bloomed before coming back to Pittsburgh only a couple of months ago, although it feels a little bit more like a couple of years ago. I'm a social worker at the core. What does that mean? It means that the values of my profession are integral to the kind of research that I do. The work that I do is community-based, it's community engaged, it's about giving community voice, it's about partnering with community in research, and about addressing inequities and inequalities. So I see my work as being largely under a health equity research umbrella. I do clinical interventions research, mental health services research, and also really focusing on health and mental health disparities across the lifespan, and in particular among older adults of color, and developing interventions to address those inequities. I would also identify myself similarly as a social justice advocate. My research addresses disparities, and in my personal and professional life, I'm fighting for the rights of others. And one of the sort of exciting things I was able to do before leaving Florida was that I wrote a bill that became a law in the state of Florida in 2021 to restructure the Florida Office of Minority Health and Health Equity and to increase access to health and mental health care for low-income and otherwise marginalized communities. So this was really important to me, and I think just another statement that I'll sort of thread throughout my talk today around the importance of using your voice, around the fact that the work that we do often is not just about building knowledge for the sake of learning more, but because we want to apply it to real social problems to improve the lives of the communities that we care about, to improve the lives of the individuals and families that we work with. And a lot of our research has significant policy implications. You know, I don't want to get too controversial, but sometimes the folks that are making the policies don't always have a real good handle on how those policies are going to impact the communities that we work with. In many ways, we're the experts. And I think it's important for researchers and scholars to do more advocacy, which again is a core value of the profession of social work. And I strive to conduct research that's going to have a real world impact. So this is a little bit about who I am. And I'm going to talk for a moment about some other aspects of who I am. And for those of you who've seen me talk about this before, I'm sorry that you'll have to sit through it again, but hopefully it's still interesting. I'm also a mother. I have 3 sons. And actually my oldest, Kamal, pictured here, I had him right as I was completing my doctoral dissertation. And so being a mother to 3 Black boys informs the research and the work that I do every day, because I strive to create a world that is safer for them, a world that is more equitable for them. And that is one big aspect that motivates me and that motivates the work that I engage in. But I'm also an artist. I'm a professional West African dancer and educator. I've been a principal dancer for many performing arts companies, one here in Pittsburgh called Balafon West African Dance that was led by my elder and my teacher, Mama Kariatu Conte, who was dancing long into her late 60s before she passed a little over a year ago. I was also the artistic director of Kuumba West African Dance and Drum Company in Tampa, Florida, and I continue to teach and educate communities, many here in Pittsburgh, in an effort to really strengthen and preserve West African cultural arts here in the United States. This is a huge part of who I am. When I received my first NIH-funded grant, this was certainly an exciting moment in my life, but perhaps just as exciting, if not more so, was when I had the opportunity to be a principal dancer in a movie. I was a lead dancer in the major motion picture Coming to America, the sequel. I was a little young when the first one came out, I don't know if some of you remember that one. And I got to perform with and for some of my icons, Eddie Murphy, Arsenio Hall, John Amos, pictured here, Morgan Freeman, Gladys Knight. This was especially symbolic for me because the African dance scene in sort of the original movie is probably one of the best well-known African dance scenes in the country. And unfortunately, it was incredibly culturally inaccurate and misrepresentative. And so it was really exciting to be able to be a part of seeing real cultural arts and music represented in a very authentic way that I got to be a part of. I also got to work with Auntie Ruthie, who did all the costuming and attire, what they would call costumes, we would just call clothing for this movie, but also she did all of the costuming for all the Black Panther movies. So this was just incredibly exciting. So you might be sort of wondering at this point what any of this has to do with the talk about excellence in the academy and leadership. And as I've said before, this is really not a shameless plug for me to highlight this movie accolade of mine that I'm very proud of. But because I say this because this time in my life has led me to a place of transparency, and something that I've learned recently, I have found has been helpful for me to share with others. Because for a very, very long time, I hid this artistic aspect of myself. None of my colleagues, leaders, supervisors, deans, no one knew that I was a dancer, that I was a cultural artist, that I had engaged in any of these activities during my time outside of the academy. I was really worried that people wouldn't take me seriously as an academic if they knew that I was also a dancer or if I was a cultural artist. And so this really huge part of my life remained hidden. And at some point, I began to realize that this hiding of myself was actually holding me back in the academy. It was keeping me from truly connecting with my colleagues and my collaborators, many of whom had their own artistic lives that they too were keeping hidden. Ultimately, I realized that what I was concerned might be seen as a weakness was actually one of my strengths. But this was something that I had to come to terms with myself and recognize this as a strength in myself and how I bring that to the table so that others would come to see that as such as well. So for me, one of the first stops on the pathway to cultivating excellence in the academy is finding a way to bring your full and authentic self to the work that you're doing. What are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing with you to your organization, to your position, to your discipline, to your field, to your community, to your teams and collaborations? Who are you? And what do you bring with you? As I said, I was holding so much of myself back for so many years until I recognized that there was real strength in these critical aspects of myself that I could actually bring to my program of research and that I could bring to the collaborative teams that I was working with and generating that would be really meaningful. I'm a cultural artist. I'm connected to my history, connected to my ancestry. This gives me strength and power. Part of my history may have been taken away from me, but I've engaged in an intentional process of reclaiming that history and reclaiming my identity. Having that knowledge is power, and it also is my self-care. It is spiritual. It connects me to community in an important way, which is critical for my own peace, but also for my own health and well-being. And it also helps me to truly connect with the communities that I'm working within. Community sees me as a part of that community outside of my work in the academy. And that's really important. I'm an artist, and art by its very nature is creative and innovative. I realized at some point that I could use the same creativity that I've used to choreograph a dance piece to choreograph a really great research proposal or put together a really innovative idea. The same skills that I've used to think outside of the box with my community programming can lend itself to outside of the box thinking and innovation in my scientific endeavors as well. I'm a performer, and I can use the skills that I've attained as a performer to build my confidence, speaking in front of a large group of people or inspiring a group of people that don't know me very well to want to engage with me on a project and collaborate with me. art is also vulnerable. And in research, we too have to learn how to embrace our own vulnerabilities. And this is something that I've been actively working on. And that's part of why I share some of these things with you and have shared with others about this, but vulnerability is hard. But it's really when I was able to come to terms with this, really being intentional about bringing my authentic self to work with me, identifying and recognizing my strengths. Doors began to open, new relationships began to develop, and people started to see me as a leader. People were saying things to me like, my ability to be so vulnerable, my ability to expose myself, so to speak, helped them to feel more comfortable to do the same. I was more comfortable in my own skin, and that was infectious and had rubbed off on others around me. So although this was never an intentional decision for me to sort of move into a leadership position, and I see now the pathways in which this was possible through my own sort of self-discovery and willingness to be open and share that process with others around me. So one of the other things about this, just to expand upon that more, is the importance of developing insight into ourselves, thinking about all the unique identities, skill sets, talents, and abilities that make you you. When we hide critical aspects of who we are, it hinders us from fully connecting with others, and prevents us from fully being able to integrate those skill sets into our academic work, when often there are a lot of places when they're actually relevant if we really stop to think about it. It's also important for us to think about, our strengths, but also recognizing areas where we may have weakness. We're often taught to hide our weaknesses in the academy, and to showcase only our strengths. But this does not work in a team environment. It doesn't work in a collaborative environment. We have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to offer up an idea that might not be good or might not be fully developed, because it may actually be innovative or spark discourse that could lead to something really exciting and amazing. Sharing ideas or sharing areas with others where we have weakness also allows us to better identify complementary scholars to help fill needed gaps, so that we can build beautiful synergistic teams working together to achieve a common goal. We also have to be willing to be self-critical, and doing so with ourselves and with others, again, allows us to connect to our peers, but also embracing that necessity of peer critique. As future leaders, this helps others also to see that they don't have to be perfect, because no one of us can be perfect or great at everything, and that's okay. I talked a bit about the importance of using your voice. This is something that has actually led to every position that I've taken since I finished my postdoc. After completing my T32 postdoc at Western Psych, I had offers from a few other bigger institutions in the University of South Florida. I won't name any names, but I took that specific position at USF because I didn't want to be a little fish in a big pond. I wanted to go someplace where I felt my voice would be valued. I wanted to go someplace where I thought I might be able to make an immediate impact. And that really factored into the decision I made about going to that institution. And it was a really great decision. In the 10 years that I was there, in addition to, of course, being promoted and getting tenure, I received numerous amounts of awards. I talked about the bill that I created that became a law. I developed multiple courses. I helped to create a brand new doctoral program. I became the inaugural special assistant to the dean in my college for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I became the inaugural chair of the Faculty Senate Council on Racial Justice. I eventually became sort of the assistant to the president of the university to help advise him and then her when they switched, when our old president, Steve Corral, resigned, on all issues related to DEI, which for those of you who know about what's going on in the state of Florida right now, you know how significant of an issue that actually is. So this was, a critical piece of my thinking and my process, wanting to go someplace where my voice was going to matter. And that also significantly factored into my decision to come back to the University of Pittsburgh to direct this Center on Race and Social Problems that was actually the impetus for me getting my PhD in the first place. So that's incredibly exciting for me to continue that. But for many of us, we are in positions where we are speaking for and representing communities that may not have voice. And so don't be afraid to use yours. You're here and you're in the room because you matter, because you have ideas that are important, because you're the future of research. And, you know, don't be afraid to share your thoughts and ideas now. You know, again, I mentioned the importance of vulnerability. It's hard for many of us, and I would say in particular, sometimes for scholars of color, to be vulnerable. We've been taught for so long that we have to be the opposite. But these are skills that need to be engaged and practiced. It's not something that always comes naturally to us. So there are a few sort of things that I have recognized, some sort of tips or nuggets that I've picked up along the way that have really led, I think, to the sort of excellence or moving towards excellence in the academy that have been meaningful to me. You know, that is passion and expertise, rigor and ethics, the importance of collaboration and communication, leadership and mentorship, innovation and impact, passion for students and trainees, and a commitment to improvement. The truth is, I never really had any interest in becoming a leader. If I take a step back, the truth is I didn't have any interest in being a researcher either. I was a clinician, licensed clinical social worker. I was very happy doing clinical work. It is through the exposure to scholars that looked like me, who believed in me and thought that my voice could really have an impact, that really began to open my eyes to the possibility of what a research career could mean or could do. So it's even more mind-boggling to find myself in a place now where people look to me for leadership. I think that this really happened organically through my dedication towards excellence in research, scholarship, teaching, service, and my community engaged work. For everyone, excellence may mean different things, but it was important for me to really be able to demonstrate my excellence in these areas. So I want to talk about each of them very briefly. When I think about passion and expertise, for me, this is all about finding your why. If someone is to ask you why you're engaged in the research that you're doing, you know, what is it about that topic that's so exciting or inspiring to you? What would you say? How would you respond? Finding that why is so important, and being able to explain that to others also helps people around you become invested in your topic, even if it isn't their area of expertise or something that they have any personal relevance to. For me, my research has always been directly related to my experiences in the field as a clinician. So the clinical work that I've done really highlighted for me some significant disparities and inequities in the field of mental health that led me to want to further study them. Challenges around lack of cultural sensitivity in sort of some of our mental health diagnostic instruments, challenges around having these rigid kind of boxes of evidence-based practice within which we were supposed to treat patients. And if I wanted to expand that or adapt that to add culturally relevant components, I needed to have evidence. I needed to have some data to show that it was going to be effective. Well, who was going to get that data? Maybe that person could be me. So these were the reasons that I went back to get my doctorate, to be able to have a bigger impact on the community that I was already working with. I find, and research continues to find, that scholars who are more than just interested, but who are passionate about their research topic and really have that, you know, chronic curiosity about finding new insights and solutions tend to be much more productive as well as innovative in their work and research. Of course, you know, researchers who conduct research with rigor and ethically are likely to produce high quality, reliable, and trustworthy results that are going to advance the knowledge and practice of their discipline and their field. That's a no-brainer. For me, this takes on special significance in the work that I do and that I'm sure many of you do in the room in terms of engaging in community-based participatory research or community-engaged research. And in particular, we're doing that work with historically marginalized communities. The University of Pittsburgh has done a lot to really enhance relationships with community in the city of Pittsburgh. I will tell you, for those of you who haven't been to other institutions, not all other universities have done so in such an amazing way. I've worked in a number of communities where there's incredibly hostile relationships between community and the university. Communities are always concerned about the motivation of engaging in research. There's always the possibility of a researcher to come in and take data for their own professional development and then leave them with nothing. So being ethical in the conduct of our research while also maintaining high quality, rigorous work that's going to move the field forward is a delicate balance that we have to engage in, but is critically important. Collaboration and communication, of course, are incredibly important. A faculty member who is collaborating with others and is able to communicate effectively with other researchers, with students, with stakeholders, is likely to foster a culture of excellence, diversity, and inclusion in their research environment, as well as being able to disseminate their findings to a much wider audience that's going to lead to bigger impact. Collaborative research teams really are a necessary and very desirable component of most scientific endeavors. And effective collaborative teams exhibit, more productivity, are able to engage in studies that produce impactful research outcomes far beyond often what could be accomplished by an individual working independently. Often our collaborative teams are made up of researchers who are committed to a common purpose, approach, and performance goals for which they all hold themselves mutually accountable. But collaboration is a skill that must be learned and practiced. Not all of us are actually naturally good at collaboration or communication, for that matter. If we think about graduate school, for many of us, our graduate program was the training ground for scientists, and most, if not all, graduate advisors and primary mentors recognize how important it is for their students to learn skills and diverse research methodologies and statistical analyses, communication, and possibly teaching. However, dissertations are most often these sort of single investigator-driven science. Formal teamwork training is non-existent in most graduate programs. Conversely, most branches of knowledge are conducted by people working together. The most highly cited papers are produced by teams rather than solo researchers. And the ability to engage in cooperative learning and produce products with a team of people is one of the top 5 non-disciplinary skills that employers are seeking. But again, this doesn't come naturally to all of us. And collaboration is a skill that needs to be taught and practiced. Some of the things that have helped me in terms of creating and fostering effective teams for collaboration has been focusing not only in my teamwork on, coming up with really novel research ideas and, trying to go for publications and proposals, but work on enhancing the team dynamics, building relationships with the people in the team, acknowledging when positive things have happened and also talking about challenges when they arise. Building a team and building relationship is so important. And that often can lead to teams that continue to be productive and effective over the course of one's career. And continue to occur even when one person or multiple people have left the institution where they were working. Also important to define goals and objectives. A shared vision among a team or a collaboration is critical. And sometimes that vision has to be revisited, and that's okay. Goals change over time. And so similarly, collaboration should be iteratively revised. Communicating effectively and frequently in a variety of different mechanisms. Embracing diversity and creativity. This is a critical innovation and excellence in research. And when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about compositional diversity in terms of race or ethnicity or gender or ability. We're also talking about interdisciplinary teams. We're talking about people who have unique skill sets to bring to the table. We're talking about people who think about and solve problems in different ways, so that we can build the strongest collaboration possible. And that also means learning how to develop some conflict management skills. Interpersonal relationships and dynamics are one of the most challenging part of working in teams. So that's also something that we can learn to enhance our comfortability with, and in turn, sort of letting go of our own egos there. A couple last minute key things that I've also learned about collaboration that were important to me as I was moving from sort of postdoc into my first independent research positions. Being strategic with the collaborations that I was engaging with, not overcommitting yourself. This can be, I think, incredibly tricky as a young researcher scholar, because we sort of feel like we can't say no to things. And when great opportunities present themselves, we want to be able to go for them. But burnout is real. The work that we do in the academy can be overwhelming. And you don't want to overcommit and not be able to give 100% to the work that you have agreed to do. One of the most important key things about this is having great mentorship and a mentor who can help you to think through the opportunities that have presented themselves to you, so that you can make strategic decisions about what to say yes to, and what to say no to, because it is okay to say no in the academy. Another thing I've learned is that it's helpful to encourage intellectual disagreement. I think sometimes we worry so much about other people's feelings that we want to be polite and we want to say this was great. I would much rather you rip my proposal to shreds, because I'd rather that happen here than when I send it out to external review. I remember one of the most sort of life-changing moments for me, and Howard, you'll remember this maybe. And I believe it was at before we had the Advanced Research Institute for Geriatric Psychiatry, we had another version, SRI, which was for those of us who were sort of moving into junior faculty roles. And this was where we were given the opportunity to have one of our grants sort of mock evaluated in front of the entire group. And of course, my K23 got picked. And it was ripped to shreds publicly. It was humiliating. It was really humiliating, but I learned a lot. I learned so much about sort of my communication style and maybe how that wasn't coming across quite well in the way that I was writing. I learned about having to be a little bit more clear in the way that I wrote out my specific aims. I heard comments that I never expected to hear about things that other people saw that I didn't even see. So it was an incredibly valuable learning experience, humbling, but incredibly valuable. And ultimately, when I finally submitted my K23 for funding to NIMH, I got a score of a 13 on the first submission. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that encouraging disagreement and putting myself out there to showcase my work to others so that they could critique me, because I was asking for that critique, really lent itself to helping me to get funded early on in my career, and get a pretty high score. So this is a key thing that's been helpful for me. The last thing here is about assessing your collaboration as a clinician. Part of what we do at the end of every clinical session is do an assessment with our client to see if the session has been helpful, to see if we're working towards our goals, to see if we need to do some shaking up or change the treatment plan. We could be doing the same kind of things in our collaborative relationships. Over time, goals change, priorities change. How can we assess our progress and then come to the table if there are things that need to be changed or adapted? Faculty members who lead and mentor their research team with respect, support, and guidance are likely to enhance the learning and development of their team members, as well as inspire those team members to pursue their own research goals and careers, which ultimately just grows our network bigger and bigger and bigger. Seeking mentorship from numerous places and different people is really important. Different mentors will be able to provide you with different kinds of things. Some mentors are, going to be really helpful with your writing and super critical of that development process. Others are going to help you navigate the academy, and others can be really helpful for interpersonal challenges and struggles that often happen. So remembering that you don't have to put all of your mentoring eggs in one basket. Identify different people who can provide you with support in a variety of different areas. I had many mentors at the University of Pittsburgh, and one in particular, Dr. Charlotte Brown, who in multiple situations stood up for me in situations where I was concerned that I wouldn't have the strength to stand up for myself. In fact, there was some discussion around my dissertation around whether it was too ambitious and whether or not I could feasibly conduct this mixed method study and whether I should just do a qual or quant study. Dr. Charlotte Brown stood up in that dissertation meeting and said, no, Kya is capable. She's shown that she's capable, and if this is what she wants to do, we're going to support her in doing it. Ultimately, I received a $75,000 grant from the Hartford Foundation to conduct my mixed method study, where I was looking at racial differences and attitudes towards seeking mental health treatment in the city of Pittsburgh. I was able to attain all of the numbers in my sample that I had proposed to, and then graduated with distinction early. So having strong mentorship is important. And then once you are in a position to be that mentor for others, you can use those skills to be the mentor to others that you would have wanted for yourself. And I talk about Dr. Charlotte Brown quite frequently. So if anyone here knows her, you can, let her know that I shouted her out again, because her mentorship really did change my life in many ways. Innovation and impact is so important in the work that we do. Be creative. Think outside of the box, push boundaries, don't limit yourself or the work that you're doing. For me, I've always thought more about what is the impact of the work that I'm going to do than who funded it or who published it or who's recognizing it or highlighting it in the academy. For me, it's always been about improving the lives of others, enhancing the opportunity for people to have optimal health and to reduce health inequities. So if my work is having an impact, that means more to me than some of the other things that we might highlight on our CVs or resumes. I think it's also important that we're continuing to create a pipeline for those who are coming from behind us. We should have a genuine enthusiasm for our profession and the learning process, but also to be training others to do the work. As researchers, we're doing this research, but often it's our students and our trainees who are on the ground floor actually doing the work. So this is important to have some passion in this area, to create learning environments that encourage students and trainees to participate actively and collaboratively. And to encourage and motivate new researchers to be excited about doing the kind of work that we're doing. And I think this, aligns back with my former point in collaboration around, encouraging, disagreement and being, critical, being self-critical. I think it's always important for us to constantly reflect on where we are in our progress, to seek feedback from our peers, from our leaders, those around us, and to strive to learn new things and seek out new professional development opportunities. The world around us is constantly changing, and it's important that, we better understand the new technologies, the new ways that science is moving forward, and find great collaborators potentially who have some of those skills, who can enhance the work that we're doing in order to really create more impact in the communities where we're doing our work. So I don't have too much more time, but I wanted to briefly, before sort of taking a moment to step back and see if anyone had any questions or comments, to talk about some of the work that I've engaged in terms of research, and how some of those little nuggets have impacted sort of the development of my research over time. I talked earlier about passion and expertise. I talked about the fact that I was hiding who I was and hiding this artistic aspect of myself from the academy. But eventually I realized not only is this a strength, but this is an area of research that actually could get funded. Once I made that connection, some really cool things started to happen for me, and my work into the cultural arts now has expanded to my program of research. I was awarded a grant from the Florida Department of Health to study the impact of West African drumming on psychosocial outcomes and caregiver burden among older adults with early stage Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. And so here in this picture, you can see some of those individuals that we were working with at the adult daycare sites in Hillsborough County. We're currently analyzing more of this data, but all of the preliminary results are incredibly positive in terms of seeing increases in self-esteem, self-efficacy, quality of life, improved anxiety and depression scores, and reduced caregiver burden among the loved ones who are serving in that caregiving role. So this is a project that I'm excited about maybe being able to move forward and to look at here in the city of Pittsburgh. And thinking about rigor and ethics, my work on the impact of the cultural arts has also been published in some pretty great academic journals and in some book chapters. And this was something I just never even realized was an area that people would be interested and excited about. I've been looking into sort of the therapeutic benefits of engaging in the West African dance as an art form, how this has, increased feelings of self-worth, increased feelings of racial identity and connectivity to that identity, and reduction in depression, anxiety, and stress. So this is also an area of work that I'm excited about to continue engaging in. Once I started doing that, I started thinking broader about collaboration and communication, becoming more creative about how my work in the arts could actually maybe become an intervention to address stigma, which is one of the sort of tiers of my research around inequity and challenges to access to care for communities of color. I was able to get a grant that was focused on anti-Black racism. This was during the pandemic. This was after the murder of George Floyd. We were seeing some significant peaks in mental health challenges in the Black community, along with challenges around race-based trauma. I partnered with This Is My Brave, which is a national organization, to produce a virtual series that would highlight and shine a light on the stories of Black and Brown individuals who had experienced mental health challenges, substance use or abuse challenges, and were dealing with race-based or intergenerational trauma as a way to reduce stigma, to encourage conversation. We know that storytelling can be a powerful tool towards healing. And the ultimate goal was to address some of the disparities around attitudes towards seeking treatment and service utilization in communities of color. Just here presented a couple of quick data points where we saw that pre to post engaging with this series, we saw reductions and improvements in every single category that we saw that we were expecting to, and significance levels were pretty high here. We saw stigma decrease, anti-racism increase, attitudes towards seeking treatment were improved. And interestingly, we found that rate of change on attitudes was the most significant for Black and Brown viewers, which just again led to a better understanding of the importance of hearing stories from people who look like you and the connection that one can have with that content. Continuing on that line of collaboration and communication, continuing to develop more research teams that then began to expand. I'm now a co-investigator on a multi-site R01 from NIMH, where we're collaborating with Cornell in New York and the University of Washington in Washington State, building upon a pilot study funded by the National Institute on Aging to look at training older adults in community to deliver brief behavioral interventions for depression, and then comparing that to master's level clinicians. The first wave of the intervention is completed. We also recently submitted to get an administrative supplement to deliver this intervention in Spanish in Florida. So we're really excited about this project. And this kind of continues a line of research that I've been really passionate about, which is building human and social capacity in community task shifting effort from our overburdened mental health system and looking at strategies to train older adults in community to deliver interventions that can improve health outcomes for their peers, which is an incredibly effective strategy for the peers, but also for our older adults who are often retired, who are looking for an opportunity to give back. We find that this can be an excellent source of a path to their own recovery process and enhanced aging in place because they are able to do this important work. Leadership and mentorship, after sort of gaining these skills and sort of these other projects, I felt that it was time for me now to be able to put in a proposal where I am the principal investigator and I will lead a major research team. And after a few tries, I was able to get a large research award from PCORI, which is about the equivalent of an R01, where we are looking at adding peer support to an evidence-based transitions and care intervention to improve outcomes in terms of rehospitalization, readmission, and post-discharge outcomes for older African Americans and Latino Hispanic patients who were discharged from the hospital with chronic disease and a co-occurring mental health condition. This is a pretty large study for me, the biggest one that I've led on my own. We've got we're looking to recruit 402 patients from across 3 hospital systems in the state of Florida that are mixed, older African American and Latino Hispanic. Right now, we're almost to 300 patients, so we've got 100 to go. So we're almost there. I'm really excited about this. Care transitions intervention are a really important area of study as hospitals are looking to find solutions to their high readmissions rates, and as providers are looking for solutions that are going to improve the outcomes for patients post-discharge. But we need more evidence to look at the impact of these interventions for communities of color. And there was some research that suggested that this vulnerable group may need additional supports. So my study only is looking at older African American and Latino Hispanic patients because we know that CTI works for non-Hispanic white patients. And I'm really excited to see what this added benefit of adding the peer support by way of a motivational interviewing intervention will do to impact these outcomes. So more to come on this study as we're moving into our last year of work. And then thinking about innovation and impact, I've had an opportunity to be a co-investigator on a really exciting project that was funded through American Education Services and Art Schools Network. This is an $8.4 million award. It's one of the largest awards that they've actually given, where we have a very amazing interdisciplinary team of folks looking to dismantle drivers of racial inequities in education by enhancing the role of the cultural arts. We're working with teachers all over the country, and engaging in interviews, focus groups, observations, surveys. We've taken them on trips. Most recently, we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and sort of went on a Black history tour there to really engage and immerse ourselves in some of that cultural history, to then think about how we bring that back to the classroom for our students in meaningful ways. So being a part of a project like this has been incredibly exciting, and has an opportunity to yield some pretty great impact. So all of these experiences then, as well as my passion for engaging with students and trainees and my commitment to this work, have all led me now to my current position as the director of the Center on Race and Social Problems, where the mission of this center is racism and oppression, and doing that through rigorous research and practice. We engage in applied social science research and scholarship. I'll also have the opportunity to mentor emerging scholars and develop innovative training programs for students, but also for faculty and staff, and ultimately the greater Pittsburgh community, with this overarching goal of understanding and addressing inequities and achieving social justice. So in some, there are many paths that one can take to your future. So, be open to the ride. I never would have predicted that I would be here 20 years ago. And I am so excited that I get to do the work that I do now every single day. Don't be afraid to use your voice. People are listening, and remember that you are likely speaking for others that might not have that same platform. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that leadership is not something you have to intentionally plan for. At least it wasn't something for me. But if you strive for excellence in your research and your scholarship, then you're already leading and doing that important work. Thank you all so much for your time. And I think we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated that. Would you like to speak a little bit about your relationship to geriatric mental health as you're back here in Pittsburgh? I really appreciated your talk, and I'd like to talk a little bit in this audience maybe about the particular concerns with geriatric mental health and the social justice issues we struggle with there, and maybe open it up for questions about that a little bit. I couldn't be more enthusiastic about your talk as it was. And I guess one other question I'll put there as well for the discussion is there was a large study here a number of years ago on African dance in the community. I was not involved in it, but as you were talking about African dance, I don't know if you're familiar with that study here in Pittsburgh, but are you connected with that, and is it going to continue?
Yeah, so this is so interesting. It's kind of a funny story in that the professor who is the principal investigator of that project, he and I kind of swapped places. So just this year, he's now taken a position in Florida at the University of Central Florida, right as I was coming back here. But all of the research assistants who are leading the intervention have all worked with me as either students or peers in West African dance. So he and I have been in collaboration. That project is still ongoing, and we're looking at now ways to continue to move some of that work forward. I think yeah, I was so excited when I found out about that. It was just kind of funny that he and I sort of swapped spots. I think in terms of sort of my pathway in geriatric mental health, I was first here in the University of Pittsburgh. Part of my initial studies were around trying to better understand racial inequities and access to care. And I was in particular interested and curious to better understand the reasons why older African Americans in particular were not seeking mental health services. I was working with a number of primary care clinics here in the city of Pittsburgh who, are the first point of contact was often a PCP for the older African American community as opposed to a therapist or a psychiatrist. And primary care physicians were often offering a medication or psychotropic med, or maybe a soft referral for services that this community just was not following up on. So we then went into a process of engaging in focus groups with the older adults in some of these communities, Homewood, Hazelwood, a few different places, the Hill District. And what we were hearing overwhelmingly from older African Americans who were living with depression, anxiety, other sort of mild to moderate mental health conditions were third like, first of all, I'm not going to take a pill. First of all, I don't know what this script is or who this doctor is that you want me to go see, but I'm not going to do that either. Third of all, I don't have depression, but I am feeling down and I have the blues. So the terminology that we were using was not also aligning with how they were describing their experience. And they wanted to talk to someone who they felt they could relate to. So they were having issues around sort of these young clinicians who maybe just came out of school, who don't really know about the social, cultural context of the world that they live in. So it was actually through those conversations that led me towards a pathway of this lay health delivery model, looking at the ability to train individuals in community to deliver brief interventions for mental health conditions. So that line and that course of work I want to continue because I see that as being a bridge to access to care, but also an opportunity to enhance the service delivery systems that we have. There's also continues to be a range of other kinds of barriers to mental health service utilization that I am interested in looking at. Sort of the social justice piece is still important to me. Differences in terms of the way that the sensitivity of our instruments, different presentations of psychosocial symptoms with relation to mental health conditions by race and ethnicity. Are the instruments that we're using sensitive enough? I don't think so. How can those things be adapted? And then more broadly, looking at the cultural adaptation of some of our evidence-based treatments to better meet the needs of this community. And then the last piece is really looking at how do we better integrate mental health services within communities and institutions where there's already trust, like churches, that I think is a really powerful pathway to reducing some inequities in access to care. That was a longer statement than we probably needed. Sorry.
No,
Oh,
there was,
okay.
it's very helpful, your insight.
And I'm so sorry. I don't know if there are other questions, but they're actually calling for me now to go up. So
thank you so much, Kaya.
Thank you all.
Really.
I appreciate it. And my email is here, so please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any other questions. I would love to talk to you, and thank you all so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.